Hi, welcome to LearnStroke IAS classes by Arjun. You're listening to the Daily Hindu News Analysis for IAS by Arjun R Shankar. Today's date is 29 November 2022, and let's see which are the most important news leads of the day and how we should study for civil service examination. The first important news was anguish over NGAC order behind posting delays in Supreme Court. So basically, the Supreme Court has stuck down the National Judicial Appointments Commission or NJSA, which gave the government an equal say in judicial appointments. So the top court struck down NGAC, and it says that the what is NGAC? You need to know what you mean by National Judicial Appointments Commission, and the bill provides for the procedures to be followed by NGAC for recommending persons for appointment of Chief Justice of India, judges of Supreme Court, Chief Justice of High Court, and other judges. So, whenever there is a vacancy coming up in Supreme Court or High Court, the central government will make a reference to the NGAC. So, what Supreme Court has struck down the National Judicial Appointment Commission, which gave the government an equal say in judicial appointments. So, the government is slowly losing that. So, is this a good thing? As per as the GS paper 2 polity and governance is concerned, we need to have a very good idea about this. So, should the collegium has the they should have the power, or the government should have the power? We should have an idea regarding that. Moving on, so what is the National Judicial Appointments Commission? What is the collegium system of judicial appointments should also be known by you. Moving on to the next article is the radio telescope floating in Karnataka waters throws light on nature of early stars and galaxy. So this brings us to an important area. What is Saras 3, which is a radio telescope designed by the Raman Research Institute, the RRI, and also where is Dandiganahalli Lake and Sharavati backwaters? Because this is very important. Sometimes you get match the following questions. And what is a cosmic dawn? Because the Saras 3 telescope for the first time have a radio observation which can actually identify the radio loud galaxies, know about the black holes, cosmic dawn. So, what do you mean by a cosmic dawn? Simply, one of the most important things in the universe is cosmic dawn. That is a period 50 million years before when the Big Bang happened. The first stars, black holes, and galaxies in the universe were formed. And you can see that there was a spin flip radiation from the hydrogen during the cosmic dawn. So you should know what do you mean by the cosmic dawn, probably because billions of years before the Big Bang. So read it from this perspective. What is Saras 3? Moving on to the next important news item is the audit rolls the Karnataka NGO. This brings us a very important question of what is social audit, because it talks about a social audit. It is very important from the perspective of GS paper 2 governance. You need to know a social audit is basically a formal review of a company's procedures, code of conduct regarding the social responsibility of the company. So social audit is basically an assessment of how well the company is performing with the benchmark of the social responsibility. So you need to strike a balance between profitability and social responsibility. That is what is called as a social audit. So in Karnataka, as you know, the audit roles is demanding a social audit. So you need to know what you mean by a social audit. Then the next important is a very important concept of in Karnataka, most RO plans violate norms. So this brings us what is the concept of reverse osmosis from GS paper uh, 3 science and technology environment perspective. You need to know what do you mean by a reverse osmosis. So what is reverse osmosis? It is basically a technology that is used to remove a large majority of contaminants from water by pushing the water under pressure through a semi permeable membrane. So basically, you need to know what is reverse osmosis and what is osmosis. Osmosis is a naturally occurring phenomenon and one of the most important processes in nature. It is a process where a weaker saline solution will tend to migrate to a strong saline solution. Example of osmosis can be a plant root absorb water from the soil, and our kidney absorbs water from our blood. So this is an example of reverse osmosis and osmosis. So this is an example of osmosis, and you should know what do you mean by a reverse osmosis. Very important. Next is something that very important news that before we go on, there is another important news I think which I've missed the presentation, but there is a very important thing that should be included. Sriharikota gets India's first private space launch pad. So it's not given in the slide, so you should know there is something called as Agnikul, the Chennai headquartered space tech startup which has established the first ever launch pad for a private launch vehicle in Sriharikota, Agnikul. So, what is Agnikul? You should know Agnikul is executed with the support of ISRO and also with InSpace. And Agnikul, there is two things called Agnikul Launchpad and Agnikul Missile Control Center. And also, what do you mean by InSpace? Very important. You should know InSpace is an autonomous body approved by the government and governed by the Department of Space. This acts as a medium between ISRO and private sector in India. So that is in space. Very important. You should know about this. So I missed the slide in this. So and moving on to the next is draft bill proposes stringent punishment for cruelty to animals. Very important. So this is again animal unique. You can understand from GS paper 3 environment biodiversity perspective, and also from GS paper 2 laws and regulations. And the Union Ministry of Fisheries, Animal Husbandry and Dairying has set up December 7 to submit the important provisions, suggestions to Prevention of Cruelty Animal Act. So, what is, you need to understand what is basically the Prevention of Cruelty to Animal Act 1960. And the draft says that there are 61 amendments to strengthen the law for animal cruelty. And you will not believe it, it prescribed 3 year imprisonment for committing a gruesome cruelty, includes a bestiality with animals. That means 3 years imprisonment if you kill an animal. And also there are many other provision for stringent punishment, a minimum fine of 50,000 rupees, which can be 75,000, or even if you prescribes a 3 year imprisonment, or 5 years with fine who kill an animal. So sometimes a very good thing for animal prevention. So this is something related to this. The next important, moving on to the editorial, is same rights. So this talks about GS paper 2 society, GS paper 1 Indian society. So you can understand the Supreme Court also from GS paper 2 polity governance. The Supreme Court has sought the government's response to appeal to allow same sex marriage under a special law, which is another thing to provide legal sanction to widening social customs. So the Supreme Court was hearing two partners who said that the non-recognition of same-sex marriage amounted to discrimination uh, for the rights of LGBTQAA couples. And the petitioners also cited what is Special Marriage Act 1954. What is a Special Marriage Act? And you should know also about something about the LGBTQIA community, which means lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and asexual, and others. So, in a first step, same-sex marriages has been legalized in 30 odd countries, including United States of America. So, after in India, after the KS Puttaswamy verdict in 2007, which upheld the right to privacy, the Navteej Singh Johar 2018 verdict that decriminalized homosexuality, there is some hope that same-sex marriage will be legalized, and there is some hope regarding this. So, what is the same-sex marriage, and what are some of the concerns regarding this should be understood. Moving and there is one there are two important mains question that you need to get from GS paper 1 society perspective. Question number 1: as people's relationship change and the society undergoes transformation, constitutional rights on freedom and liberties must extend to every sphere, including same-sex couples life. Discuss. So this is a question from society as well as GS paper 2 governance. There is another question: social mindsets are conservative and so well entrenched that anyone who feels differently is stigmatized, humiliated, and ostracized. Analyze the statement in the light of recent incidents. So, this is also mains question that you can read it. Moving on to the next important editorial is time for change. China must complete full vaccination at the end of zero COVID policy. So, this brings us a lot of important area. What is a zero COVID policy? What is China's zero COVID policy, and what are some of the rules that China is putting forward? And what are mRNA vaccines and how do they work? Because this talks about mRNA. So you need to understand that vaccines help prevent infection by preparing the body to fight foreign invaders such as bacteria, virus, or other pathogens. All vaccines introduced into a body is a harmless piece of particular bacteria or virus, which is giving an immune. So scientists have developed something called as a molecule messenger called the mRNA. So this is, you should know more about the vaccines and mRNA, the molecule called the messenger RNA. But something very important from GS paper 2 health and GS paper 3 science and technology perspective. So moving on to the next is a nightmare for domestic violence survivors. This is very important from the perspective of GS paper 1 society. So you can read, it talks about just ahead of the day, International Day for Elimination of All Forms of Violence Against Women, number 25. And it also talks about what is the protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005, or PWDVA. What do you mean by this? So, this talks about domestic violence, which is a punishable offense under Indian law, which is also a human rights violation. And it gives you a lot of statistics. It's very important that you read this article for GS1 society perspective. It says that more than 32% of ever married women aged 18 to 49 have experience with emotional, physical, or sexual violence committed by the husbands. And the most disheartening thing is that only a third of women subjected to domestic violence reports, or just go for the reporting. So you can get a lot of statistics, and also a mains question that can come here. While legislature recognizes that domestic violence is a crime and civil remedies exist through protection orders, managing the fallout of domestic violence is still being subcontracted to survivors and the family. So whatever legislature brings in, or protection brings in, the management of domestic violence is always to the survivor of the family. Discuss. So it's a good question that you can answer. Moving on to the next important editorial was regarding the khula ties the Muslim clerics in the north. So basically, this article talks about what is khula, what is triple talaq, and the ulema's interpretation of women's right, and how a Muslim women's right to divorce. It talks about various aspects regarding the Islam community and the divorce, etc. So very important. You can just have a look at this. Moving on to the next important is national page. India France discuss defense industrial ties, make in India. This article basically discusses important topics like what is Indian Ocean Commission, or IOC, and what is Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, or IONS, and it talks about the geopolitics of Indo-Pacific region. And it very good talks about Make in India program, and India and France are going to have a wide range of bilateral, regional, and defense cooperation. So it talks about the Indian Ocean Commission, which is an intergovernmental organization that links African Indian Ocean nations like Comoros, Madagascar, Mauritius, and some of the seven observer countries are China, European Union, India, Japan, UK, etc. And the Indian Naval Symposium is actually a series of biennial meetings between the littoral states of Indian Ocean regions. It provides a forum to increase the maritime security. So it's basically what you mean by the IONS. So that is very important in this. And moving on to the next is government gives extension to Foreign Secretary Quatra till April 2024. So this brings us what is called as the Appointments Committee of Cabinet. What do you mean by the Appointment Committee of Cabinet? GS paper 2 Polity and Governance. So the Appointment Committee of Cabinet as of 12/7/2021 is basically consisting of the Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Sri Amit Shah, Minister of Home Affairs and Minister of Cooperation. So moving on to the next one is Mumbai tops in sales of poll bonds, followed by Calcutta, Hyderabad. So this brings us another important article, GS paper 2, governance and law-related activity. It basically brings us the larger question: what do you mean by electoral bonds? What do you mean by electoral bonds? And they came into existence in 2018, and Mumbai, Kolkata, and Hyderabad saw the sales of most number of electoral bonds. And SBI is the sole financial entity who is empowered to issue both the bonds. And it talks about the various statistics of how much bonds that has been sold. So basically, you should know that any citizen can donate the same to a political party of his choice, and you can get the bonds from SBI. And the bonds can be issued in the multiples of 1,000, 10,000, 1 lakh, 1 crore, etc. So know more about electoral bonds and the statistics. And the special NIA courts awards a lifetime to 5 terrorists. This brings us what is NIA if you don't know. GS paper 3, internal security and security. If you do not know, you should know what do you mean by NIA, and what is UAPA, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, and what is the Explosive Substance Act that has been talked. Moving on, International Relations GS paper 2. Canada says India as a crucial partner. Term China as an increasingly disruptive power. So the whole article talks on the what do you mean by EPTA, Early Progress Trade Agreement, which is very important, and it also talks about the Indo-Pacific region and how China is a disruptive partner, and how India is becoming a very crucial partner in the Indo-Pacific region is also very important. So, what is EPTA in the concept of Canada? Is Early Progress Trade Agreement. It's a very good step towards Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. So, EPTA is being looked up as a first deliverable towards strengthening the economic and trade relationship between India and Canada. So, EPTA is important. The right to religion does not include right to convert. Home Ministry, GS Paper 2, Polity, Governance, Perspective. It clearly talks about Article 25. The what is Article 25? You need to know. The propagate portion, the propagate in Article 25, right to freedom of religion does not include the right to convert, says the Home Ministry. It is rather the nature of positive right to spread one's religion by exposing its principles. The right to religion does not include the right to convert other people to a particular religion, especially through fraud, deception, or coercion. So you need to know what is Article 25, and also mains question. There may be freedom of religion, but there may not be freedom of religion by forced conversion. Everybody has the right to choose their religion, but not by forced conversion. Critically analyze the statement from GS paper 2 perspective. Find it out. Moving on to the next area. Bharat Biotech's intranasal vaccine gets booster dose not. So the Bharat Biotech's vaccine Incovac BBV4 BBV 154. So you need to know what is Incovac is getting the uh, node by the CDSCO, the Central Drug Standard or Control Organization. So usually you need to know what do you mean by the CDSO, and probably it has given the approval for restricted use in emergency situation for 18 years and above. It is the first intranasal vaccine to receive both primary series and heterologous booster approval. So very important. So read it from GS paper to health. Next is center plans to document the culture, social practices of indigenous tribal society. So you should know this from what is the role of scheduled caste and what how tribal system is being preserved. And very important, what is IKS, Indian Knowledge System. So IKS is established, is actually an innovative cell under the Ministry of Education. It is established to promote interdisciplinary research on all aspects of IKS, and spreading the heritage of our country, traditional knowledge, arts, literature, agriculture, basic knowledge, etc. So IKS is very important. GS paper 2, it is also important for education. Moving on to the next is center must present correct info on GM mustard before Supreme Court. So that brings us, you need to know what is GM mustard and what are the important negatives of genetically modified mustard. Science and technology, and GS paper 3, environment perspective. Next is you take up the international news is landslip. What is a landslip? Because landslip in Cameroon has brought out a lot of discussion. What is a landslip? What is the difference between a landslip and landslide? Is it the same? What are the impacts of landslide or a landslip? And what is the angle of disaster management during a landslide or landslip? What is the so-called restoration process or disaster management angle involved in this? So GS paper 3, disaster management, and GS paper 1, you need to know what is a landslide or landslip. Next international is Mauna Loa, world's largest active volcano, starts to erupt in Hawaii. So you need to know from GS paper uh, geography perspective, you need to know one, what is an active volcano? What do you mean by active volcano? What are the features of active volcano? And where is Hawaii located? Locate the map. Locate in the map of Hawaii. Where is Hawaii and what is Mauna Loa? So that is very important. Next is international relations GS paper 2, UK to strengthen its tie with Europe and Indo-Pacific. So basically, it talks about UK strengthening its tie with Europe, giving a lot of grants to Ukraine. So, and it is also taking a tilt to the Indo-Pacific region. So, just from international relations, you need to know how UK is fitting into the Indo-Pacific equation. And the China traders to buy low-cost iron, India iron ore, GS paper 3, economy, and also some portions of GS paper 1, geography. So you need to know what is iron ore and where is iron ore deposit found in India, can be a geography question you need to know for prelims, etc. Next is try working on technology to detect pesky calls, GS paper 3, Science and Technology. So this brings us what is try? Can be a GS paper 2 question. So what is the regulatory body try? And what is UCC? What is unsolicited commercial communication? So this is very important. So a UCC means and unsolicited commercial communication which a subscriber opts not to receive but does not include any transactional message or any message transmitted on the direction of the central government or state government. So that means it's a communication that subscriber opts not to receive but does not include any transactional message. So what is UCC is something that we need to know. So these are some of the most important news leads that appeared in today's uh, newspaper. So please read it from a larger perspective. So keep listening to LearnStroke IAS classes by